If you remember back a couple years ago, I got that log load of firewood logs, and I sawed a couple of the logs from it. And this is one of the cherry logs I had sawn up then, and I had it upstairs in my house for a while this winter, drying in front of the wood stove for the final drying. And here I am getting ready to use it to build some shelves for the guest bathroom that I never finished up last year when I was working on that. So first thing I did is I kind of cut them to shorter pieces to deal with and threw them on the CNC router. And you can see I've got them kind of all shimmed up because they're not perfectly flat or straight, and I'm just using this to flatten them down. And there's what I'm doing, just some straight passes back and forth. Now the cutter that I'm using, leaving some burning marks and stuff there. It's actually that white side one that I bought a while back from my router slab flattening jig for my router sled, and so it's pretty dull now, and I'm gonna have to grab another one. But there's the first one. It took a couple minutes, and you can kind of see where it looks like it's not flat, but it is perfectly flat. That's just marks from the router going in different directions. And then I went and I just threw the second one on, and this one I didn't really bother too much with, and I should have re-zeroed the Z on the top of the surface. Turns out this was thicker than the last slab, and I actually was able to stall out that 3 horsepower router, taking a full 3/8 cut there in the cherry. But I just reset that and went back, and a couple minutes I had that one done, and then there was one last one, and just shim them up on one side there so they sit flat, and go back and do a couple passes to do the cleanup. So that makes really flattening slabs really easy now. And once you've got one side flat, just run the other side through the planer a couple times and get that parallel to it, and you're all set to go. So, this is putting these, this would have been a firewood log that's being turned into these shelves, so it's really putting it to good use. And you can see it's some really beautiful cherry. So there are the 3 shelf pieces there, and these are brackets that I bought to use for the adjustment on this shelf. They're just those cheap steel ones that you pick up at, I got them at Do It Best. And these are the little metal holders for them. Then I went over to my bandsaw to try and cut these slabs down and hit the power switch. Nothing. Wouldn't turn on. Nothing at all. What a piece of junk. Something went wrong, and I checked the power. It still had power to it, so I know it's inside the electronics. So I was mad, and I decided to just grab my circular saw here and cut these. And after doing this and seeing the sawdust all over, you will be seeing a video about a track saw in the near future, I can tell you that. So I got these straightened up. And these actually are 2 other pieces for the other sections of the shelf. This one's for the uprights here. And just trying to cut this down narrower than 8 inches so I can throw these on the joiner because I don't need the wider pieces. And there I wanted to show you what's inside that Laguna bandsaw. There is no motor starter or overload protection or anything. Just a cheap $3 contactor and a couple of switches. And that switch right there actually has no contact anymore. So I made a quick drawing of how everything was hooked up before taking the wiring out, pulling that switch out, and went on Amazon and I found something similar and ordered it. And meanwhile, back to doing some flattening on that one piece for the uprights here that I had just narrowed down with the saw. So as always, a couple passes on the joiner. If it's under 8 inches wide, it does a wonderful job. And it's amazing how here we are the next day, and Amazon got me the replacement switch I ordered. Now there's a Laguna one, and that one there is dead, that side of the switch. And this is the replacement. It looks different. I actually bought 2 of them because it was cheaper to buy 2. And, a little different looking on the outside there, but it'll do the job, I think, and has a much better contact block on it. This is really a better switch. So I just was able to mount it and wire it up just like the old one. It had the normally open and normally closed contact and stuff, and put it in and try it, and sure enough, so it works. Only thing is I forgot to put the handle up to tension the blade before I hit the button there, so it wasn't turning full speed. Here, I'll show you. There's the one side of the switch there. Nothing happens when you actuate it. And here you can see the other side actually works. You let go of it and it changes. So definitely was a switch. And luckily Amazon has stuff like that in stock for next day delivery. I couldn't believe it. I think it was about $7 or $8 for the switch. Well, actually it was 2 for $13, I think. The switches on Amazon, and probably to wait for one from Laguna would have cost a fortune anyway. So now I've got that last piece that I just flattened on the CNC router, and I'm cutting the upright brackets out of it. And there I cut a pocket for the rail for the shelf, and now I'm just going to cut the outside of it. I tell you what, this router really is making me lazy. I used to do stuff like this by hand and have to make jigs and fixtures, and it's just a matter of throwing on the router, and then I cut a little bit shallow of going all the way through, but there you can see there was a slight warp of about 2,000ths in the middle of the board there, and I just ran it through my planer and everything came out. And this is how the uprights go in these brackets here. You can see they're just going to drop in there flush, so they won't look too bad when it's all done. And I did have to take the rounds out of the corner there. I used 1/4-inch diameter bit, so I had some little radiuses there, and I got these Nerix chisels honed up pretty good, and they really are nice. I really like the feel of them, and how they cut and everything else, and nice straight cuts, and you can get tight in the corner with the that little relief on them and stuff. So it only takes a second to clean up stuff like this. So there they are now with the corners done. The brackets drop right in, and perfect part every time with that CNC router. So I put a couple coats of the polyacrylic on them there before I got up to here. And then I decided to go upstairs before I cut the shelves and do some measuring to figure out where the studs were and what I was going to have to do to mount it and how to design the shelves for the spacing and stuff. I don't know, you can't really see out the window there, but it was another one of those cold, nasty days the other day with snow again. So I realized I had no studs to hit, and everything was going to be out in the air. And then I was able to draw up the 3 shelves, and here I go getting ready to cut them out again. And there I'm just finding the top of the board, so I know where that is, and then just let the router rip on it and just sit back and watch it. And it just takes a couple minutes. I think it took 3 minutes to cut this out, because I had to do 4 passes on the depth of it with the 1/4-inch cutter. But pretty much once you've got one done, the rest are really easy. And like I said, it does make you lazy, because I used to do all this stuff by hand, and it would take me hours. Where this, I just let it go. About 3 minutes later, I had the first shelf all cut out and ready to go. And you can see I cut just a little bit shy of going all the way through, about 2,000ths, I think it was, on that one. And there's the first shelf, just needs a little bit of cleaning up, sanding. And then just time to do the next 2. And again, just clamp them down and let it go. So definitely, this router really was a great addition to my shop. I will say, if I had it in the beginning, I probably wouldn't have bought any of the other tools. It just does so much. And there we have the 3rd shelf, and then just gonna go over to the sander here and run it through on the face side up to get the fuzz off the edges of the routing area, and then just flip it over and run it through again, and back side up to get the little the ridges where it didn't go all the way through the material. And then just time to do a little bit of final sanding on them to even them up there. I just wanted to do a quick job before I took them over to the router and put some radiuses on them. And I mean, putting radiuses on the top side would be easy with the CNC router if I learn how to program it and get some good software. But it's easier for me to do it by hand right now, and then to do the final sanding, I'm over into the sanding booth there, and just I'm gonna sand them right up to go through the grits up to 220 grit to have a final final part ready to finish. And it is beautiful wood, I will say that. So got them all sanded, ready to go, and then I just had to put it together to get some numbers for the brackets that cover those metal shelf supports there. So there you can see what they look like, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim them back now. And the CNC router sure does make a lot of nice kindling wood for the fire too. So I got some numbers off that assembly there when I put it together, and was able to go back and just do a quick bracket, draw it up, and cut it on the router. I don't have any good nesting software, so I just wound up copying it 6 times on the board here, so you can see there's a lot of wasted space here, but I'm still learning, and eventually I'll get there. But in the meantime, I do have my, it took a couple minutes, I've got my brackets, and back over to the sander here, and I'm going to just kind of clean up the face side there, get the fuzz off of that the router bit leaves when you cut, and then I'm just going to flip it over, run it through, and take that last couple thousandths off. And here you'll see I'm like Lucy in the candy factory trying to catch all these pieces as they come off of here. Sometimes you just need another hand. But, that makes it real easy to get the parts out, keep them together. And then again, I like to clamp them all together to do the sanding, and, I'm over at sanding center there and just doing some final sanding on them before I do the routing. Now there's where the that starting pin on the router table really comes in handy when you're doing little stuff like this and trying to catch a corner and not go over and stuff. And these little bench dog pushers from Rockler really do stick good to the parts and help when you're doing little parts like that. They do grab good, and nothing slips and your fingers aren't near the cutter, so they're a real good thing to have also. But there you can see that starting pin makes it so you can go right to the corner and not go around it. Then I'm going over to the table saw, and I took one of the 1/16 inch thick blades from my dado set and put that on the saw by itself. You can hear it sounds really funky there because it's only got 6 teeth on it. But it does do the job that I needed to do the cut in these brackets for that metal bracket to fit in. So I just ran one as a test piece, and then I went over to the bench and took one of these metal brackets. I'm going to cut it down to fit my needs. Those armor clamps really are wonderful. I love them in that dog bench. I use that all the time now, and I don't know how I lived without it before. But so I'm just using the jigsaw here to cut them out. They're really fairly soft metal and stuff, and I'm really hacking away at these things, so they definitely aren't as strong as they started out being, but they'll be really good for my needs when I get done. So I got the front cut off there, and now I'm just going to trim back the back area. And I will say those Freud blades really do cut good. And this is how they're going to go together. That bracket's going to go on there and then slip right up in here. And I just put it all together there to make sure things were flush and everything was right before I went back and cut the rest of them. Now, the only way to do undercuts like this is to have one of these jigs. I know that mine is an old Delta one, but all kinds of companies make them, but they do allow you to clamp the work really tight. And I just used an angle block to get everything in line. And then I really cranked down on the handle there. Took the angle block out of the way. And I'm just going to put that slot in there now. I've got to stop on you can see you screw in the zero clearance insert there. And always stand off to the side and keep your hands on the back side of the cast iron when you're doing stuff like this. And you can see this jig does make it easy, but always a chance something can come flying out, so you never ever want to be in line with the blade. So there it is, a little bit over a 16th. And they fit right in, so I can do them all now. And that's how they're going to work. They're going to pretty much hide the ugliest part of the shelving. And now I've got to go back and cut the other 5, so I'm just going to use that first one that I know works now to mark that off and do it. And same thing, just use a jigsaw on them and clamp them down to the bench. So, I think this is the safest way to cut parts on the table saw when they're small like that. And over to do some of the final sanding and put 3 coats of polyacrylic on everything. Okay, now I'm getting ready to mount the uprights up in the bathroom there. So I made a spacer. I knew that wall was level. I put a level on it. And I made a spacer to make it easy for me to start marking them out. And I located the top of it compared to the mirror where I wanted it. And just drilled a hole right through the bracket there. And then I have to drill a bigger hole in the back for a wall anchor because I'm in a hollow section. So I drilled a 3/8 inch hole back there. And then I have these wall anchors that have like fingers that they go through, and then they've got fingers that open up on the other side. And it's supposed to be a heavy duty anchor with like a 50-pound per anchor load rating. So you have to squeeze in the fingers, and they're made out of plastic, but they work good. Squeeze in the fingers and then get it through the hole there, and then they open up on the back side. Alright, with the first one in place, I'm just going to get that tape out of my way and then hang up the upright there to use that to locate the rest of them. The only screws I could find long enough that fit these were Craig screws, so that's what I'm going to use here. I'll probably replace them with some flathead Phillips if I can find them. So now that I've got the first one done, I can go back and locate the other 3 holes and drill for the small holes, and then go back and move this out of the way and carefully center the drill bit. You have to make sure these are really centered, otherwise you have a problem because there's not much clearance to miss by. And I just use a dustpan with a rubber tab on the bottom to catch dust. That really helps when you're drilling with sheetrock. And with the holes in place, I just got to get the other 3 inserts through the wall there, those hangers. And there again, you can see out the window, it's still snowing this next day here. And then just, put the screws in, and that one bracket is up. So now to get the right spacing to fit the notches in the shelf, I actually made two pieces of wood the right length, so I could go back and mark out the holes for the other side. So same thing, I drilled a small hole through, and then I put a bigger hole, and now I'm putting the anchor in, and just using a screw to go into it, like a 2-inch Craig screw. And by making those 2 spacers, I know the shelves will fit in place. And it's time to just check the level of the shelf brackets in place, make sure I'm pretty close. And I was only off by a hair, and I was able to just shift the one bracket up a little bit before tightening the screws. And then it's time to just set a shelf in place, make sure everything fits, and make sure that they're going to be level. And yes, they are, so that's good. So now I can go back and get all the rest of the holes in there, and the rest of the anchors in the wall. And, hopefully this will hold. Let's see, I've got four hangers per shelf, and they're supposed to be like at least 40 pounds each, I think. And so that would be 320 pounds. So that should be good for anything we're going to put on the shelf. I would rather have them mounted into the studs, but sometimes you just can't do that. And again, I'm just sliding these anchors in here. You always want to use anchors that expand on the back side of the sheetrock whenever you're hanging anything, with any weight on it. And then just tightening the screws, and those two uprights are in place, ready to go. Then I just brought all the shelves up just to make sure they didn't need any modification before I went down and finished them. And I just went down and put 3 coats of polyacrylic on them, and I sanded between each coat and give it some adhesion. And then after the last coat, I did another 320 grit sanding, and then I'm just putting on some Johnson paste wax. And this polyacrylic will take about 6 months till you can really polish it out. So this is just kind of temporary here. And then it's time to put these little brackets in place, or a piece of the wood in place to hide the bracket. And there you can see I put wax paper in the areas to prevent glue from getting on, because I'm going to try this Gorilla Glue. Usually in the past I've used epoxy, but I saw this stuff in Home Depot and I grabbed some of it. It looked like it would be a lot easier to use, and it says it'll work for wood and metal. So first thing you have to do, if it's a non-porous surface, you have to wet it. So that was a wet paper towel I put on. And now I'm filling the crack up down in that bracket there with the Gorilla Glue. And then I'm just going to push it up in place here, and you can see where the wax paper will keep any that squeezes out from sticking to the shelf. Because I don't want the shelf glued in place. I want to be able to move it later. So I got that in place, and I had some blocks of wedges cut off of that CNC waste. I put a little piece of double-sided tape on to hold it in place so I could use that to clamp these in place. The Gorilla Glue says you should clamp it for 2 hours, so this will allow me to get a good grip on it without slipping off the edge or pulling it sideways or anything. So I just have to make sure I get that all up tight, and it'll keep the shelves from rocking sideways and everything too by having that wider piece of wood in there. And there's the first one, and I use one of those auto clamps in the back there. Oops, got my head in the way. And that one's all clamped in place. I just have to let that dry. And same thing, I went back and did the exact same thing to the other one. So I've got to let that sit for 2 hours before moving on. And here we are 2 hours later. Take all the clamps off and everything, and the glue seems to have set up really good. And you can see when you once you get that cover in place, and you've got nice adjustable shelves, and they really don't look that ugly like the cheap brackets, or the big double wide metal brackets or anything. And if you really want to hide the upright, you can just cut a thin slot in that upright piece of wood and put them in from the back too. So you won't really see anything, but I kind of like doing it this way. It's easiest for me to mount. So now I'm going to start on the second shelf here, because I've only got one set of clamps up here and one set of blocks. So same thing, just put the glue in, clamp it in place, and I put the double-sided tape on those blocks again to keep them from slipping when you clamp them, and use the auto clamp on the back there. I wish they made some of these that were about 3 inches longer. Boy, they would be really the perfect combination for jobs. And there we are. Got the second shelf all ready to go. Just have to give that another 2 hours. And then 2 hours later, I got the bottom one done. So I let that all sit for a couple hours, and went back, got the clamps off, the wax paper off, and everything was dried and stuff. And then I decided to just go back. I figured I wanted the shelves right where they are now, and I just put a little tiny piece of double-sided tape on the front top of that bracket there so that they wouldn't slide off. I didn't want to use hardware or anything, and I wanted it to be easy to move. So I just put a couple pieces of double-sided tape on top of there, and then I'll just stick the shelf down on that, and that'll keep it from sliding off from vibrations or earthquakes or anything like that. So there it is, all done. It did take a couple hours to make them and put them up and stuff, but I'm glad to finally have this bathroom done. I had promised my wife last year, but we didn't know whether we wanted a cabinet or just shelves, and we decided to go with shelves, so I finally got around to it. And this is some beautiful firewood. Can't believe that came out of that log load. So there it is. You can see, actually, there's a vanity that I finished last year, and if you look at that polyacrylic does not let cherry darken. It has enough of a UV protection that this shelf still matches it perfect. There's no real darkening of the old stuff, so that's why I like that polyacrylic. So I just thought I'd share this with you and show you a quick, easy way to make some adjustable shelves using cheap hardware that don't really look that bad. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.